and welcome back to Bigger Sister's channel, a peer-to-peer education platform for workers in the industry. My name is Estelle. I am the Managing Director of this community project, and this is the second video of the NDIS series where I talk about how to get onto the NDIS. In the first video, I talked about my story and I tried to prompt you to think about your story and how your health impacts your day-to-day functioning. In this second video, we're going to talk about how to demonstrate to the NDIS that you have an impairment, that you are disabled, and how it is impacting your functional capacity in your day-to-day life. The assessment process is intimidating for a lot of people. It can seem complicated, but this is quite a long video because I really try to unpack every step of the thing. What are you trying to demonstrate? What are they assessing for? What are they looking for? What are some of the buzzwords that you should include? So if you want to start your application, this is the video for you. And if you like this video, please give a subscribe, like, comment, share it with your friends. And then there's a third video as well. So thanks, enjoy. Let's just assume you've accepted you are disabled, and let's just assume that you have explored the healthcare system. So I am going to read from the website what the NDIS considers eligibility. There's an age requirement. Obviously for children it's different, but let's just assume you're around my age, like an adult. There are some requirements around residency. You need to be like either a visa holder, a citizen, permanent residence, or some other fancy schmancy piece of paper that says that you are a person that is allowed to be a person in Australia. Now, then we go into the disability requirements. And remember again, the disability requirements, you need to understand your condition well enough to understand what you need to advocate for. So, do you have a disability caused by a permanent impairment? Now, I want you to understand what permanent impairment means from a lived experience point of view versus an NDIS government policy point of view. But these are two different glasses that we're going to put on and compare, just so you can understand whether you're eligible. So on the NDIS website, it tells us you meet the disability requirement if we have evidence is the key word here, of all of the following. Your disability is caused by an impairment. Your disability is likely to be permanent. Your permanent impairment substantially reduces your functional capacity to undertake one or more of the following activities: moving around, communicating, socializing, learning, or undertaking self-care or self-management tasks. Your permanent impairment affects your ability to work, study, or take part in social life, and you'll likely need support under the NDIS for your whole life. Now, it says here, if you give us evidence you have been diagnosed with one or more conditions on list A, and I'm going to go through some of the most popular, I'm going to say popular but underrated conditions to see if maybe I hit some points. We'll likely decide you meet the disability requirements. If you meet the disability requirements, it's likely that you'll need to be on the NDIS for a long time. This means you won't have to prove your disability every time we reassess your plan. What that means is this is not a means test process. What does a means test mean? It's a determination of whether an individual or family is eligible for government assistance or welfare, in this case NDIS, based upon whether the individual or family possesses the means to do without the help. So in my story, if we go back to my story, one of the reasons I didn't apply for the NDIS sooner, I wasn't like, oh, I'm disabled, off I go to the NDIS. There was still a period of a few years where I didn't feel worthy of the NDIS because I was a fully functioning adult and I was making good money. I didn't think about the cost of that though. I didn't think about how much it cost to be disabled. I didn't think about my suffering. I didn't think it was an option to ease that suffering. I didn't know what an accommodation looks like. I didn't know all of these things because I'd been working hard my whole life and I thought that was the baseline. I thought that was the standard. And a means test means you don't have to prove that you're poor. You don't have to prove that you're worthy for this. You just have to prove that you're disabled and that it impairs you, your day-to-day living. So the NDIS is not means tested. It means if you have money, doesn't matter. If you have a supportive family or lots of people around, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you meet the eligibility criteria. And in saying that, like, what really sort of solved it for me is I didn't want to steal from other people either. I didn't want to steal the NDIS from people who deserved it more because they couldn't work, as opposed to me who could and was making a lot of money. The thing that made me really, that sold NDIS to me was the fact that I thought, what if I don't want to work in this industry anymore? And I thought about it, and I do like this industry, but what if I didn't? Would I be forced to have sex with men even if I didn't? And that made me feel very uncomfortable. And then that's what made me realize that I do deserve help, because I can't live without a high income, because I can't afford to be disabled, because I have to pay for help all the time. And that's what really made me go, oh gosh, I do need help, and I am going to do that for myself. So let's go through some of the conditions that are likely to meet the disability requirements. And I'm looking at the NDIS website myself. Now, autism. I have autism. However, autism, as I understand it in the NDIS perspective, remember NDIS perspective versus lived experience, autism diagnosed by a specialist, multidisciplined, so you're talking about specialists, so not doctors, the thing that they graduate after doctors. So pediatrician, psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, the next level after doctor, they're your special multidisciplinary team. That means we're talking about not just one type of doctor, many type of doctors. Experience in the assessment of pervasive development disorders and assessed using the current Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSMV. Diagnostic criteria as having severity at level 2, requiring substantial support, or 3, requiring very substantial support. And what all these fancy words mean is, I know a lot of us have autism, and I know a lot of us is undiagnosed. And I know that also being diagnosed, there are consequences to that are not all positive. But if autism is something that you have and you believe that it is worth getting support around, and remember, this isn't means tested. So this isn't worth in the eyes of the NDIS. It's worth as in, is it worth it to you? Is it worth your time? Is it worth the effort? And if it is, you're going to need to go through the process of being diagnosed. And there are 3 levels of support that are provided to people with autism. There's level 1, 2, and 3. If you're level 1, I guess you're someone that's kind of more like me, which is high functioning. I would call myself assimilated and conditioned. I have autism as well, but that doesn't mean I have a good experience under autism. Would not recommend it for other people, especially in this society. Level 2 and level 3 means you will get support. So if you're someone that's got like on the spectrum sort of, then maybe not for you. Anyway, so that's one thing to consider. That, okay, this is interesting. In list A, they don't go through a lot of cognitive conditions or psychiatric conditions as they're known as. But something that might be helpful is visual impairment or deaf blindness, which I think there are some people who are a bit blind in their eyes and they just think that that's normal and that, you know, they just adjust and then that's your life. But that's not necessarily true. Some more conditions that could potentially be considered under the NDIS. There's different types of autism, like atypical autism, Asperger's syndrome, which in the medical field is a bit different. If you have multiple sclerosis, that can be considered under the NDIS depending on how it impacts you. Okay, sensory and speech. Fun fact, I didn't learn how to speak I didn't speak until I was after the age of 10. And I don't have autism, they reckon. No one says that. Now that I've mentioned it, everyone's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So from what I can find from the website, and I'm just remembering this now, is the NDIS is quite guarded in what they consider just a disability in terms of mental health. And I think no one's told me this, and no one's, like, I haven't really done deep research into this, but knowing what I do, having a master's of public health and kind of how policy works, I think because one, the science and the body of knowledge around mental health is changing every day, but policy is very slow to change. So this and this is a bit incompatible. And I think that's why there's a lot of conditions that are not listed as a disability under the NDIS, but the things that are listed as a disability are highly researched. There's like a huge body of research where it cannot be denied. It cannot be denied that this is a disability. I'll give you a really good example. So for my application with the NDIS, I remember having, PMDD as my primary condition. Then I think my secondary was probably depression. I had ADHD on there. I didn't have autism because technically it's not diagnosed, even though I've done a diagnostic tool for it. I've just never had like a psychiatrist, even though they've said yes, they've not done this written bit of it. When I finally did get onto the NDIS, the only conditions listed was major depressive disorder, which is not even the type of depression that I have. The type of depression that I have is persistent depression, which I believe the research is not up to date on, which is a very, very different form. But like, they don't really care about the semantics. And then the other one was anxiety, which I would argue is, I remember saying the first time I said this and my anxiety went really high for a couple of months, but my anxiety is pretty much under wraps. It's not functioning my day-to-day capacity, not nearly like things like ADHD or autism, but it is there. And then PTSD was the other thing that was listed, which CPTSD to be exact, which I still don't quite understand how that affects me, but I'm glad that they acknowledge that, and I'm glad that the research acknowledges that there is definitely something there. So in saying that, that the NDIS is quite guarded in sharing what they consider disability. So from your point of view, it's more about demonstrating that you meet the eligibility requirements. We're going to go through what is so we don't know what the disability is necessarily. If you have a very complicated health history, let's just say you come from an abusive family, or you had a relationship that, left you destitute and broken in soul, or something like this. I don't know, maybe you had a really traumatic experience overseas. I don't know. That could be considered a disability. But we're talking, once we've sort of established that part, now it's about the impairment. Like, this is straight from the NDIS website. When we consider your disability, we think about whether any reduction or loss in your ability to do things across all life domains is because of an impairment. Once I read this definition, I'm gonna compare it with me. An impairment is a loss or significant change in at least one of your body's functions, your body's structure, or how you think and learn. To meet the disability requirements, you must have evidence your disability is caused by at least one of the impairments below. Intellectual, such as how you speak and listen, read and write, solve problems and process and remember information. Cognitive, such as how you think, learn new things, use judgment to make decisions and pay attention. Neurological, such as how your body functions. Sensory, such as how you see or hear. Physical, such as the ability to move parts of your body. You may also be eligible for NDIS if you have a psychosocial disability. This means you have reduced capacity to do daily life activities and tasks due to your mental health. It does not matter what caused your impairment. For example, if you had it from birth or acquired it from an injury, accident, or health condition. It doesn't matter if you have one impairment or more than one impairment. So, is your disability caused by an impairment? Remember, you meet the disability requirements if we have evidence of all the following. And the first point is your disability is caused by an impairment. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that you don't consider yourself disabled, but maybe you have an impairment. Maybe you have a significant difference in how your body functions, structures, and how you think or learn. Maybe this is on an intellectual level. Maybe you don't speak a lot, or you can't really listen to other people, or maybe you never read or write, or maybe you don't know how to solve problems on your own, or maybe you don't remember much information, or maybe you don't even process a lot of information. Maybe there's just like one way that you process information and every other way just doesn't work from you. That could be considered an impairment. Let's think about it from a cognitive level, such as how you think. Now, it's really hard to compare how you think and how other people think and go, oh yeah, there's a stark difference, because you're a bit biased into thinking that you're the normal or the default. But generally, if thinking is a painful process, as it is often with me, even though it's my default process, there's probably a difference there. I tend to overthink things. I think things from a number of perspectives to the point where it drives me crazy. Makes me highly intelligent. Also means I'm just absolutely exhausted all the time. So this is a change, a very different way of thinking. Learn new things. Perhaps you have an intolerance to learning or change or like anything different. Like that is a skill. It is a human ability skill, a social skill to know how to learn, assimilate. And if you can't do these things, then maybe you have an impairment. Use judgment to make decisions. If you are completely emotionally driven, then perhaps there is a cognitive dysfunction to you. And also pay attention, which we won't go into all the reasons why I think people are losing attention nowadays, but it could be considered impairment. Neurological is how your body functions. This is a little bit more measurable. So these other two, it can be measured through, there are diagnostic tools, there are screening processes, but it's a bit like it's self-reported. You know, like, yes, I feel like I think too fast, or I feel like I'm erratic, or it's all self-reported. What's neurological is a little bit more neutral. You've got machines that do this measuring for you, and they can tell you, yes, the pH levels or the whatever levels are outside of the norm. Then you've got sensory, such as how you see or hear. I would say I have sensory issues, but it's more of a processing issue rather than my ability to see or hear, which is perfect. But the way that information, so that's why it goes into cognitive. Now, this is, again, remember, these are your impairments. Your disability, whatever it might be, is caused by an impairment. So one of these things in your body, your brain, the way you think, is causing your disability. This is something that you have to have evidence for. And what that means is psychology reports, sometimes from your teachers, your school reports, something maybe even from your parents, like maybe even work, maybe at work your boss noticed that you are absolutely useless when there's distractions around you. But if they put you in a small room, you get your work done. Like that could be considered an impairment in a way. Yeah. And with the NDIS and going through this process, there's a lot of buzzwords that you need to use in your application. And I will share some, and this is coming from from a Masters of Public Health sort of perspective. Psychosocial, words have meaning. Psychosocial is a very catch-all term because our language isn't sufficient to explain why A and B causes C. So psychosocial means our brain and ability to relate to each other, there's a disability there. There's a disconnection there. This is a fancy way of saying you're neurodivergent. Yeah, you don't do things like other people, like the normal people. You have a psychosocial disability. If you're someone like me who isn't in a cookie cutter version, none of my disabilities technically can be measured through a neutral machine, like a blood test or a urine test or a scan. I have to prove my disability through self-reported diagnostic methods or screening methods, which means this is the evidence, or evidence of other people's reports of your behavior, of your actions, of how you talk or how you are, your energy levels, how you relate, your emotions, how you express yourself. These are all evidence. These are all access points to show if you have an impairment or not. So the first thing to think about whether you're eligible for the NDIS, think about, is your disability caused by an impairment? Does the way your body function, how you think and learn, or the structure impact how you live in your daily life? If yes, then maybe you have a disability. Now, the next thing that they look at is your impairment likely to be permanent? And I'm going to read from the website again, just so we understand what they mean by this. We need evidence that you'll likely have your impairment for your whole life. You might have some periods in your life where there is a smaller impact on your daily life because your impairment may be episodic or fluctuate in intensity. Your impairment can still be permanent due to the overall impact on your life and the likelihood that you'll be impacted across your lifetime. Even when your condition or diagnosis is permanent, we'll check if your impairment is permanent too. For example, you may not be eligible if your impairment is temporary, still being treated, or if there are treatment options available remaining. Generally, we'll consider whether your impairment is likely to be permanent after all available and appropriate treatment options have been pursued. To give us evidence that you have been diagnosed with a condition on list B, we'll likely decide your disability is a form of impairment that's likely to be permanent. For my application process, this second thing, is your impairment likely to be permanent, is something that I tried really, really hard to prove, because the impairments, I had the names. I had the PMDD, I had the disability, I had the anxiety, I had the PTSD, I had the ADHD, I had the PCOS, like I had all of these things, but is it permanent? Now, my argument for my case was because I will have cycles for the rest of my life, reproductive life, so that's until you're about 40 to 50 years old, I'm pretty much going to have this isn't a temporary thing, this is majority of my life. Mind you, I tried really hard in my application to weigh on this point, but they didn't even acknowledge PMDD as a condition, right? Because they have their own list of things that they acknowledge as conditions, which is probably evidence-based. And remember, the evidence isn't always great for the conditions that people suffer from. So that was a very interesting, I don't know if, I can't tell you if the reason I got the NDIS is because I was able to prove the impairment was permanent, even though they didn't acknowledge the condition alone, if that makes sense. Or whether, and then they just assigned all of those impairments to the conditions that they had approved. I can't tell you. Either way, doesn't matter what the impairment is, you just have to show that it's permanent. I think what they're trying to do is discourage people from getting handouts. And what that means is if you are disabled and you've just gone, yep, I've got depression, I've never tried to fix it, but I'm going to go into the NDIS and let them fix it for me. I think that's a red flag. They're not going to entertain that sort of irresponsibility, I guess. You need to take a bit of personal responsibility when it comes to your health, which is so hard and inherently violent sometimes going through the public healthcare system. But you have to show good faith. You have to show that you have tried to help yourself. If you have a psychosocial disability, which I imagine most workers do, what they're going to look for is it permanent, as in, have you had this for a long time? Have you had this for 5+ years? Have you been depressed for 5+ years? Have you been anxious 5+ years? Probably something like this. And if you can demonstrate that, you know, I lost X amount of jobs because I couldn't keep it up, I couldn't be operating on a normal level, or I have gone through 30 doctors because no one understood me, or this is all evidence that it's permanent rather than something temporary. Now, there are a lot of mental health conditions that are temporary. Take, for example, you might have something like, even depression can be temporary. So let's just say you had a nasty divorce and you're down in the dumps for about a year or two. That's depression. However, you picked yourself up and now you're back. You can't really, I don't think you can get on the NDIS if you've never had depression before. I'm the type of person that's had issues my whole life, so it's pretty easy for me to demonstrate that I've had issues my whole life. However, if something's happened and then there's like psychological response to it, I don't think that would be seen as you taking fair, diligent efforts to get yourself treated. Another thing that they're going to look at, and this is what I did in my application, is make sure you have tried all treatments available. Now, for something like depression or anxiety or any of the, I know BPD is on this in the thing. I think eating disorders is on the thing, is something from their perspective is approved. If you can, if you're going to say that you have BPD, for example, you need to show that you've been doing dialectic behavioral therapy, because that is the golden standard treatment for BPD. If you just say that without having done the golden standard treatment, I'm going to guess that they're not going to take your application seriously, because you haven't demonstrated that it's permanent, because you haven't tried to fix it. Something is more, you can demonstrate something's permanency by the attempts to fix it. If you've tried everything, then most likely it's going to stay, and nothing's worked, then likely it's going to stay there for the rest of your life. This is what they mean. Once you've accepted you've got a disability and that there are some impairments to your body and the way that you process things, that is the reason that you have a disability. You have to demonstrate that you've tried different medications, different types of treatment, you've gone through public health service options around you, and so before coming to the NDIS generally is what they mean. And what that means, this is a real kick up the butt as well. If you have been neglecting yourself and your health and you've just sort of resigned to this existence, even though it is incredibly painful for you, you are just doing yourself a greater disservice by not exhausting all options, even if those options are somewhat traumatic, as is going through the public healthcare system, I know, but you still need to demonstrate that you've done it. So if you haven't, and you're pretty sure you've got a disability, this is your sign to start trying and getting that evidence. So then when you get your final, sorry, we can't help you, we don't know what's wrong with you, then you can apply for the NDIS. I know with my brother, for example, I did my brother's application for him as well. And I would say from my lived experience perspective, as opposed from the NDIS perspective, he is much more disabled than me. I'm high functioning, I'm high achieving. He really struggles to do things, really basic things. He's really smart. He's like me though, like we're all incredibly, and we are so hardworking as well, but he can't do anything outside of work. But because I think I refused to give up on my health from the age of 14 and I was always in the public healthcare system. He is a guy, and so mental health for men is often like, I have to deal with it myself. There's nothing wrong with me. The same attitude that I had around the ages of 21, he had, but probably like 10 times worse. And the only reason he ever got treatment was because we institutionalized him, because he was a menace. Like that was the only reason he started getting treatment. Like, but you shouldn't have to be at breaking point to get treatment. Depression doesn't start when you break down. Anxiety doesn't start at a panic attack. Like there are so many telltale signs that require intervention, and this is why it's an insurance scheme, by the way, because when you get your interventions earlier, your quality of life can improve. You help yourself, you add your chances. The odds are in your favor the earlier you get to it. So there's no use denying it. There's no use denying if you're not well. You gain nothing. You get no reward. No one gives you a trophy. No one applauds you. No one says thank you. No one puts your name on a sign. No one congratulates you. No one remembers you. No one cares that you were strong silently. You need to admit, I'm very passionate about this. You need to admit if you're not well and seek out treatment options, because no one's going to do it for you and no one cares. No one cares. This is why I was so dead set on improving my own health, because I knew no one else was going to do it for me. It was driving me mad. It was absolutely driving me mad. Anyways, let's go back to the eligibility. Is your disability caused by an impairment? Is your impairment likely to be permanent? So the question is, do you do things differently that feel worse or is harder than other people? Have you tried everything to fix it? Is there any medical treatment for your impairment? That's the next thing that they look at. We don't fund supports to treat your impairment. Now, what that means is, say you've got depression, they're not paying for your Zoloft. Like, they're not going to pay you for your medicine. There's another program for that. There's PBS. Like, there's other government programs. The NDIS is its own program. It doesn't interact with any other program, as in it doesn't do what they do. It interacts with them, so you get complementary care, but it doesn't do their job for them. Instead, the supports we fund can help you reduce or overcome the impact your impairment has on your daily life. They can also help you increase your functional capacity, independence, and your ability to work, study, or take part in social life. Your impairment will likely be permanent if your treating professional gives us evidence that indicates there are no further treatments that can relieve or cure it. Now, this is something that I did in my application, is I wrote my application, as in I wrote the supporting letter for my doctors. Why? Because 1, I know my own history. 2, I did enough research to understand what the buzzwords were, like psychosocial disability, unlikely to, nothing else to repair or remedy it, all treatment options exhausted. These are the buzzwords, right? They don't know that necessarily. They're doing a million other things with a million other patients. So I wrote the letter and I said, if you agree, or if you need things to change, please go ahead. If you feel like I put words in your mouth, please correct me, but then just sign it. And that's what they did. And they did edit some things. So yeah, this is how you show evidence, is you need 2 statements from 2 primary doctors. And they kind of need to say in their letters that there are no medical treatment options and they've tried everything. If the doctors resign that they can't help you, that's when the NDIS can. Because remember, the NDIS doesn't do anyone else's job. They do a different thing. So when you're sort of at the end of the line, which is kind of where I was when I applied, though I was at the end of the line way before that. And I think a lot of people are, if you're starting to engage in this industry to support yourself having a disability, then you need to get onto the NDIS. Your treating professional will tell us or be asked to certify if there are medical, clinical, or other treatments that are likely to remedy your impairment. We need to understand whether there are treatments which are known and available, appropriate for you and your impairment, evidence-based, that is, there's proof that it's likely to be effective. Again, I use the example of borderline personality disorder and compare it to diabetic behavioral therapy, because that's the gold standard. So if that's evidence-based, there's a lot of, so if you've got depression, you've never done CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, get out of it. Get out of it. Like, you need to show that you've done things that are available, appropriate, and evidence-based. You've got anxiety and you've never tried any sort of mindfulness, or I don't know, I would say somatic, but I don't know if the evidence supports that, but they need to show that they've tried to treat you and fix it before you say, I can't do anything else. And, I don't know about this one, but I have a feeling, so there's this thing called bodily autonomy, and it's a human right. So if you're a human, say for example, I know there's a lot of people that are adverse to the idea of medicine, specifically like tablets or injections or anything foreign going to their body. They get very like, nah, 5G, or like, I don't know, it's going to change my DNA, or whatever they've read on the internet or seen on the internet. And technically you are exercising your bodily autonomy, and you are well within your rights to reject medical treatment for your body if you do not want to. Yeah? Let's use bipolar as an example. Maybe you're bipolar and maybe your religious beliefs say that you can't take medication. Will that fly under the NDIS? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's a good question that I just came up with myself in my head right then. But you need to at least show that you've tried. I know a lot of people are scared of medicine. However, the evidence doesn't substantiate your fear. Yes, there are always bad reactions to medicine. However, there's no evidence to suggest that you will be a bad reaction or a good reaction. It's either way, it's kind of neutral. We just know that majority of people usually can tolerate that medication if it's on the market. To continue with the definition, the word treatment should be understood in a broader sense and may include changes to your diet and lifestyle. So for example, conditions such as obesity are unlikely to be found permanent because you can intervention through exercise and diet. If you're still undergoing or have recently had treatment, we'll need to wait until you know the outcome of the treatment before we can decide your impairment is likely to be permanent. In some situations, it may be clear your impairment is likely to be permanent while you're still undergoing treatment or rehabilitation. For example, you may still need treatment and rehabilitation for a spinal cord injury, but it's clear you have a permanent impairment. They have a really good example. Like, if your spine's gone, you don't have to wait till you try everything to fix your spine, like it's gone. You might still have a permanent impairment even if its effects may change over time. I think psychosocial disabilities is a good example of this. So like, I know for a fact, for example, my depression is debilitating and generally speaking negative. We've got a whole lifetime of evidence to support that. However, there's no one saying that it doesn't improve over time, especially if I have the NDIS support. That doesn't disqualify me. For degenerative impairments or those that get worse over time, we consider them permanent if treatment isn't likely to help or improve the impairment's effects. To finish up on, are you eligible? The other thing you need to demonstrate in your application is that your permanent impairment, so now we've accepted that it's permanent and that you are impaired, you need to demonstrate that it substantially reduces your functional capacity or ability to undertake activities in one of the following areas. One or more, to be fair. Communicating, socializing, learning, mobility, self-care, self-management. So what do those words mean? Let's get into it. Communicating, how you speak, write or use sign language and gestures to express yourself compared to other people your age. We also look at how well you understand people and how others understand you. Now, I remember for my application under communicating, I said that I wrote my application as if it was my worst day, not as if it was my best day. And in my worst day, how I speak is very aggressive because I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I'm hurt and I feel like I'm at my wit's end, and that's how I communicate. And it can really impair, like it can really affect my day-to-day functioning, because then my friends think I hate them and my family thinks that I'm upset at them, and then the doctors don't want to help me because I'm being rude, and then no one wants to help me because I'm being a cunt. And like, yeah, that's because I'm disabled, babe. Like that's the reason I speak like that, is because this is a symptom of it. It's a condition. The next thing is socializing. How you make and keep friends or interact with the community, or how a young child plays with other children. We also look at your behavior and how you cope with feelings and emotions in social situations. Now, for me, I think socializing, I think my skill set there is pretty good. But there are some complementary reasons. One, I'm Turkish, so community is a huge thing that we're socialized to believe in at a young age, which I feel like in Australia and Australian culture is much more individualistic. So you're not as encouraged to make friends and keep friends. Behavior, how you cope with feelings and emotions in social situations. So I think if you like avoid social situations because you get so much anxiety, which I do sometimes, like that is you demonstrating how your anxiety, or like maybe anxiety caused from PTSD, has reduced your functional capacity. I avoid social situations because I cannot tolerate them. Or like I avoid making new friends because I fear rejection. Or I don't even talk to my parents because I don't know how to ask them to communicate with me in a way that suits me and doesn't feel like they're sort of talking down at me or something like this. If you're the type of person that bursts out or closes down in conversation, then this is evidence of you having substantially reduced your functional capacity to undertake an everyday activity. And it's an everyday activity to talk to your family, friends, talk to other people. And if you can't do that, if your behavior is so different because of things going on in your head and in your body, then you might be eligible for the NDIS. Now, next thing that they look at is learning. How you learn, understand, and remember new things, and practice and use new skills. Obviously, everyone learns differently, but some people are, significantly challenged in that capacity. For me, I love to learn, so it's a little bit different for me, despite being disabled. And although I could demonstrate that I had reduced functional capacity in this area, I think it's going to be different for everyone because it's such an individualistic thing. But for me, and I can only speak from my experience, it's like I struggle to learn new things, especially if I don't want to, and I need like constant reassurance, constant like cheerleading. I can't remember things. I need to put signs up everywhere. Like it's so hard sometimes. I need to be genuinely interested in something to do something, like learn. I'll give you a very great example. Today, I've learned how to set up a camera, which I've been avoiding this whole year, because I said to myself, I don't know how to learn how to film myself, blah, 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 blah. I hired videographers, I did this, I did that. I don't know how to edit. Didn't think that I could learn, even though I 100% can, and literally outsourced the project, even though I could do what I'm doing right now. I just needed to apply myself a little bit, but I didn't. And the only reason I'm doing it today is because I'm feeling slightly inspired, which is a 1 in a million day. Like it's not in a 1 in a million, but like once in a year, since it's been like a year and I haven't done this. So yeah, so that's just like an example. Like, yeah, I can do it, but can I really? This is an example of your functional capacity being reduced because of a permanent impairment. Next domain that they look at, so mobility or moving around, how easily you move around your home and community and how you get out and out of bed or a chair. We consider how you get out and about and use your arms or legs. Now, mobility, when we think about mobility, we think physical impairments. I can't lift my arm, I can't move my legs, my spine doesn't work, whatever. However, it's not limited to that. I know, for example, I can't move. I genuinely can't get out of bed a lot of the time because it's all just a bit too much, and this stuff, all of this. So my mobility is like literally substantially reduced because of all of the combination of my conditions, which is called a psychosocial disability. Remember, buzzword, use that word, psychosocial disability. If you're like me, you've got many things going on. And this can impact my mobility. I can't move, I can't shower, clean myself, I can't feed myself. This is, if I can demonstrate that, and the way you're going to demonstrate it as well is either your doctor's going to say that this is what you do, or you're going to say this is what you do. That's usually how you demonstrate it, unless you've got like maybe a teacher or any other sort of trusted member of society. So that's one of the domains. The next domain is self-care. So that's personal care, hygiene, grooming, eating and drinking, and health. We consider how you get dressed and shower or bathe, eat or go to the toilet. Now, for me personally, my NDIS plan, a lot of my funding goes into my self-care. So, because when my health is at its worst, or I'm not doing so well, health-wise, my functional capacity when it comes to self-care is substantially reduced, more than substantially. It's like significantly reduced, and I cannot look after myself. I cannot, like, look at me now. I probably look okay because I'm conventionally good looking, but I haven't showered. Actually, I did shower yesterday, but that's so because I worked. I like my job because it makes me shower. Like I wouldn't shower otherwise because I have no reason to. I have no shame. Hygiene, grooming, eating and drinking. I don't eat, I don't drink unless I absolutely have to. I forget all the time. I don't feel the sensations in my body because of the autism and ADHD. I can get dressed. I remember saying I can get dressed and I can shower technically, but I can't always eat, and I can't always like eat healthy. So this is, if you can show this, maybe you can show this through a psychologist report. And if it relates to your ability to think, feel, behave in your head because of your disability, then it's going to go into your NDIS application. The next thing is self-management. How you organize your life. Consider how you plan, make decisions, and look after yourself. This may include day-to-day tasks at home, how you solve problems or manage your money. We consider your mental or cognitive ability to manage your life, not your physical ability to do these tasks. Very important. So since I know a lot of sex workers have psychosocial disability, which remember is like that catch-all phrase, there's a key sentence here. We consider your mental or cognitive ability to manage your life, not your physical ability to do these tasks. My physical ability, amazing. Assuming it's not my worst day, great. However, that's like the first thing. Then the next thing is, can I get my shit together to do the task? Most of the time the answer is no. I need a lot of systems in place to do this, and this is when the NDIS is helpful because they can get occupational therapists in to help you with this. Personally, the lengths I have to go to do a basic task is just profound in comparison to another person. Me and a normal person, the negotiation I have to have with myself, it's like a hostage situation. It's like a part of me has got a gun to my head going, I will not do the thing, and I have to convince myself to do the thing, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. But this is the nature of the disability. So if you can demonstrate that, then they will consider your impairment as, yes, substantially reducing your functional capacity in this domain. Next. Okay, so those are the 6 domains, by the way, and I'll show you this later, but in my application, I went through all of this. Like, I really unpacked each of these things because this is what they want to see. So the next thing that they say is, your disability substantially reduces your functional capacity if you usually need disability-specific support to participate in or complete the above tasks. These disability-specific supports include a high-level support from other people, such as physical assistance, guidance, supervision, or prompting, assistive technology, equipment, or home modifications that are prescribed by your doctor, allied health professional, or other medical professional. To help us determine if you're eligible, we need to know your capacity and where you need help from. We get this information from your NDIS application. If you have more than one permanent impairment, we'll consider them together to see if they substantially reduce your functional capacity. We consider how you're involved in different areas of life, like home, school, work, and community, and how you carry out tasks and actions. We also consider any other factor that may impact your day-to-day life. Your needs might go up and down each day or each month. Progressive multiple sclerosis, for example, can be a good example of this. We consider your ability over time, taking into account your ups and downs. So what this is really saying here, under the criteria they look at, does your impairment substantially reduce your functional capacity, is before the NDIS, how did you do these things? Like, how did you do self-management, self-care, learning, socializing? So for example, before the NDIS, how did I do these things? I had a lot of support with my friends. I had people come with me to social engagements because I didn't want to go alone. I couldn't go alone. I remember for years I had friends come in, cook and clean for me because I couldn't do it. But remember, I'm Turkish, so we have a little bit of a different approach to community, and that was normal. I didn't pay them, but that's what they did, and I needed that, and I could demonstrate that. But this is what the NDIS can do for you. You can pay someone to come and cook and clean for you and make sure that you're eating well. I had mentors, I had psychologists, I had self-help coaches and life coaches and all this sort of stuff to get me to do the things that was just so hard for me to do because I'm dealing with this disability 24 hours a day, really. And maybe I'll have a good few hours in that day, but that's mostly it. So that is another thing that they'll look at in your application. And you remember, they wrote, we'll assess this through your application. So it's very important you are very honest, but also accurate in your application, because that's what they look at. So the other thing that they look at is, does your impairment affect your social, work, or study life? Then we look at how, this is what they say on their website, then we look at how your impairment affects your ability to work, study, or take part in social life. This means your permanent impairments affect how you can and keep a job, contributing to your community, or join social activities. We get this information from your NDIS application. Remember, it has to all be in your application. We look at your ability to do things like fund or keep a job or start your own business, study, spend and save money, play sports, go to the movies, volunteer, travel. It doesn't matter how much your ability to work, study, or socialize is affected by your impairment. It only needs to affect your social or work life in some way for you to meet the criteria. So what does that mean? So remember, they're looking at how your impairment affects your social, work, or study life. So I'll refer to myself. Find and keep a job or start your own business. I work in the industry. I can't get a normal job. I can't get a 9-to-5 job. I can't. I used to. And then I got into the industry because I felt my health decline and I felt myself suffering. And so I picked a job that was high paying and I could pick my own hours. So I pick when I work, how I want to work, what conditions I want to work under. That's what I love about this job. And I know for a fact that many sex workers do the exact same thing. So this is a good example of how you can demonstrate how your disability is impacting your ability to work. If you can't keep a job because of your disability, psychosocial disability probably, then you probably can demonstrate that and try for an NDIS application. Same thing with study. Like if you have always wanted to learn X, Y, and Z, but you cannot fit into this cookie cutter version of learning, then you probably have an impairment under the NDIS lens. Same thing with spending money, playing sports, going to the movies, volunteering. If these are all things that you've kind of wanted to do but just can't because of X, Y, and Z reason, then you probably have an impairment and you can demonstrate that. The other thing that they look at is, will you likely need help under the NDIS for your whole life? NDIS supports are investments. This is really important. Are investments that help you build or maintain your functional capacity and independence and help you work, study, or take part in social life. Even if your needs go up and down over time or happen episodically, we may still consider it's likely that you'll need lifetime support under the NDIS. We consider your overall situation to answer this question. When we decide if you're likely to need support under the NDIS for your whole life, we consider your life circumstances, the nature of your long-term support needs, whether your needs could be best met by the NDIS or other government and community services, because remember, they don't do any other jobs. For example, you may have an impairment which is caused by chronic health conditions. That's a lot of workers. Many chronic health conditions are most effectively managed or remedied through medical management through the healthcare system. Yes and no. I will argue with that, dear NDIS website. If this is the case, you may decide that you don't need a lifetime need for support under the NDIS. Agree to disagree. The point is here, this is a criteria that they look at. So again, if you're able to demonstrate that it is permanent, this is probably going to mean that you're going to probably have it your whole life, especially if you can demonstrate you are getting support in other ways, but you still need help. Or like, not need help, but like, there's no reason to do things the hardest way possible. You know, you can make things easier. You can make things like, my friends shouldn't have to come with me for every social engagement that I want to go because I'm terrified. My friends shouldn't have to come and cook and clean for me because I can't get myself to do the thing. You know, they shouldn't have to do that. So that's what the NDIS scheme's for. And like, again, it's an insurance scheme. So that means that if you can keep these functional capacity domains, self-care, self-management, learning, etc., these are the features that make for a complete human experience. If you can enhance these domains, you're probably going to have a better life. So the NDIS helps you like access that better life. So your disability isn't just compounding in misery for you, and you actually can have a meaningful quality life. And I know so many disabled people that are just absolute gems. You know, I have a client with cerebral palsy, and he's been on the NDIS for many years, and he's traveled the world. He's done so much because of the NDIS, and now he's looking at leaving home and living quite independent. But he's like, you know, looking to move out, and like, this is all possible because of the NDIS. He's got cerebral palsy, which is very easy to demonstrate, not so much for a psychosocial disability like most workers have. But what I'm trying to say here is he didn't have to do it the hard way. His parents was looking after, his mum was looking after him why did he have to do it like in the hardest way possible? There's so much more to life if you accept support that you're eligible for, but you do have to do this little fighting phase before you accept it. Like, you need to fight for it, and then you have to accept it. That is it for this part of the video where I talk about, are you eligible? And if so, let's break it down. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this week's video about the NDIS. Please share with your friends, comment, like, share your stories, share your tips. If you've gone through the process, how it has been for you. Let's have a discussion. We really appreciate any support that we can get for our little community project.